What's going on, guys? Thanks for checking out the videos. Joe here with Odyssey Off-Road Channel. Today, we're doing a video I've been meaning to do for a while, actually. But for whatever reason, it just kind of slipped my mind, and I forgot to record it. So I was actually just at the gas station, and leaving the gas station, there was a Rubicon Gladiator pulled in. It kind of just re-triggered my memory. I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to record that video. So and the reason why is because it's just such a crazy topic. And we'll get out of the truck here in a couple of minutes, so you don't have to stare at me the whole video, and we'll walk around my Mojave and talk a little bit about differences and why I chose the Mojave versus the Rubicon. As some of you guys know, I've had two Mojaves. This is my second one, and so the decision-making process for me, I'll kind of go through that with you guys. It may be the same for some of you. But anyway, like, some people really, they're looking for a mid-sized truck. They've narrowed it down to a Gladiator. And then at that point, maybe some people have narrowed it down to the Rubicon or the Mojave, because they're the upper trims. They're the most off-road worthy trims. Maybe that's what they want to do with the truck. Or they just like the look of it or whatever, or they just want the high trim level. So if you've narrowed it down that far and you decide you don't want a sport S or wheelies or something like lower trim levels, and you've narrowed it down to the higher trim levels, usually the biggest decision at that point is, do you go Rubicon or Mojave? A lot of people just go with what they can get the best deal on, and that's good too. But there's also some factors to consider that I don't think a lot of people actually think about when they go into it. Like, they just may have in their brain, I love Rubicons, I want a Rubicon, it's the ultimate, and they'll just go and buy a Rubicon, and then ultimately maybe not be happy with their decision. So they didn't really think it through or think about what they're really using the truck for. And so, your judgment can be a little bit clouded by predetermining your favorite, I should say, in your brain, maybe, instead of looking at the actual differences between the two. And then there's another group of people who they just can't decide, and I was in that boat for a little bit, but there was quite a few things that led me to the Mojave, and I'll go over my reasoning why, and maybe that'll help some of you guys make a decision if you're kind of on the fence and not know which one to get. There's definitely some benefits of the Mojave, and there's obviously some benefits of the Rubicon. I'm going to say something that's probably a little bit controversial, and I'm going to say, if you're going to get a Gladiator, I think the better trim, and not because I have two of them, but it's because the reasons that led me to this truck, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. I think the Mojave is the smarter buy from not everybody, but a majority of people buying the Gladiator. And I think a majority of people that bought a Rubicon and have some complaints about the ride quality and certain things would not have those complaints had they bought the Mojave. And the same goes true for the other trim levels. If you bought a Willys or a Sport S or whatever, and you're not happy with the way the truck rides or the way the truck looks, you ultimately probably would have been better served getting a Mojave. And so, before we get out of the truck, there's one thing on the inside that I do want to point out, that's a difference between the Mojave and all the other trim levels. And depending on how tall you are, I'm about 5'6", 5'7", somewhere in that range, and the seat backs on the Mojave's got a deeper bolster for your sides that come along your sides of the seat, and I'll show you guys here in a minute. But they come up very high on it. So for me, I'm not that tall of a guy, but I like a wide shoulders and wide upper back. And when I sit down in the seat, depending on how I have to really consciously have my right arm positioned in a way where or else the bolster is kind of like pushing on my right shoulder blade, and it pushes my shoulder forward, and then I ended up like my shoulder hurts or my neck hurts by the time I get out of the truck if I'm not conscious of where I'm placing my arm. So if you're taller, I think you kind of sit above it, and that's not a problem. But they bring the bolsters, besides being deeper, they're up higher than they are on some other trucks. A lot of performance-oriented trucks and cars. They have big bolstered seats to kind of keep you in place for when you're going fast and stuff, from sliding around the truck on the seat. And that's the case with the Mojave, but they come up very high. And for me, sometimes it's a little uncomfortable. They're just like right behind my shoulder blades. Like my shoulders are just beyond the seat, and kind of pushes my shoulders around forward and makes it, my neck and shoulders kind of hurt a little bit. There's ways to alleviate that, obviously, but my point is, sit in the truck, sit in both of them, see what's more comfortable, because 90% of your riding, well, all of your riding is going to be inside of it, but 90% of your comfort comes from the interior. Maybe a little less than 90%, but most of it, the rest of it's going to come from the suspension and how the vehicle handles on the road. But you sit in the seat every single day. That's your first point of contact. So if you can't be comfortable in the seat, I suggest sitting in both. So that's the first thing I would do, is if you're going to buy one, because they are very different, and one may not be as comfortable for you than the other. So let's get out of the truck. We'll talk about some of the mechanical things. I'll show you what I mean with the bolsters on the seats, and you can see that. And we'll talk about my decision-making process, what led me to the Mojave 2 times, not just once. And then hopefully that'll help some of you guys. So let's do it. So here's what I mean with the bolstering. You'll see it's way deeper. It's about 1.5 inches, I think, deeper here than the other Gladiator trims and the Rubicon. My buddy's got a Rubicon Wrangler, and we measured them, actually. I think it was about, if I remember correctly, 1.5 inches difference from this seam to the stitching on the outside. And when you sit in it, you'll see how high they come. So almost to the middle of your back comes out, and it makes it a little bit uncomfortable on my shoulder blades sometimes, if I have my arms up and on the center console. If I have them down or whatever in my lap, it's not as big a deal. So that's really it. Only difference you're going to have to consider with the interior. So take a seat in them, see which one you like better, which one's more comfortable, and then go from there. But let's get to the outside of the truck. So the Mojave has a lot of differences than the Gladiator. So we'll run through them real quick, but most people, if you guys have been researching this topic already and you're considering 2 of these trucks, you probably know most of the differences. But let's talk about the positives and the drawbacks to them all. So obviously they both come with like a 33-inch Falcon Wild Peak, and they both can come with either the all-terrain or the mud-terrain. Personally, my preference is the all-terrain. They ride better on the road. They're a little bit lighter than the mud-terrains. If you're planning on altering your vehicle anyway, you're paying extra for the mud-terrain package, so it doesn't make sense to pay more money for those tires. If you plan on upgrading 35s anyway, just get the all-terrains. Obviously, it comes down to what your dealer has on the lot in some situations, but I find that most of them have the all-terrains, and the mud-terrains are kind of like far few and in between, at least out this way here in Arizona. I don't know how it is in the rest of the country, but suspension-wise, is going to be completely different, and that's the biggest thing. And then, so you have the Fox suspension with the remote reservoirs on the Mojave, both front and rear. Front's a full remote reservoir, where you got it tucked away up front there. And then the rear is going to be a piggyback shock, like that. And the Mojave is going to sit about 1 to 1.5 inches higher in the front, suspension-wise, than the Rubicon will, and that translates to about 2 inches higher than the other trim models. Because if you couple that with the 33-inch tires plus the inch and a half front suspension lift, you're 2.5 inches taller than the base model Gladiators, and about 1 inch to 1.5 inches taller than the Rubicon. And it is pretty drastic. If you park them next to each other, you can see the front tire is pretty tucked up in on the Rubicon. These 33s are, as opposed to the Mojave here, where you have quite a bit of room in the wheel well. And also with the suspension on the Mojave, you get the hydraulic bump stops right there. So that's pretty cool. That's like an industry first, actually. Is first truck that's ever had those. I think there's maybe a truck or two coming out with them now, but this is the first truck that hit the market with hydraulic bump stops. Of course, now if you go over to the Rubicon's going to have, they used to come years ago, I don't think the Gladiators ever did, but the Wrangler Rubicons used to come with Fox shocks. They were valved completely different than these Fox shocks. They were very soft because the Rubicon's more targeted towards a rock crawling vehicle. This truck is more suited and valved suspension wise for faster paced trail riding, and that translates to a lot of benefits in everyday use as well, which we'll go over here in a minute. But the Rubicon, now specifically on the Gladiator and on the Wrangler, come with the red bodied Chrysler branded shocks, or Fiat, whatever you want to, whoever's running them now, shocks. They're in-house shocks though. They're not Fox or Bilstein or anything like that. They're a Chrysler Jeep branded shock. So, and there's a lot of people that complain about those shocks. They're very, very soft. If you have the Rubicon and you're going on trail riding and you're not using it for rock crawling and stuff like that, and you're doing some trail riding and you pick up the pace slightly and you hit a decent bump on the trail, those shocks bottom out. That suspension on the Rubicon is very, very, very soft, and it bottoms out really quick. This truck is amazing on the trails. If you're just trail riding and you can go at a pretty good clip and the suspension just soaks it up and eats it. The Rubicon's, obviously the suspension's way different, and that's something you're going to have to consider, and you don't always feel that on a 1.5 mile test drive around the corner. So that's something to really think about and consider. I mean, I've seen plenty of people that have the Rubicons, and one of the first things they do is get rid of those shocks and upgrade the suspension, and that's probably why they bought it, because they used their intended purposes a little more extreme, so they go that route. But those shocks, if you plan on driving it every single day, 95% daily driver, or even 98% daily driver, and you're going to take it on the trails once in a while, my strongest suggestion to you is just to get the Mojave. You get a little bit better ground clearance right out of the box. You don't have to do, if you don't plan on doing anything to it and you just want to leave the truck stock and drive it as is, and most of your driving is on the street, the Mojave drives better on the street. It's a better riding truck. The suspension handles that better. Just goes to the way it's tuned for off-roading, for more high-speed stuff. You're riding on the road higher speeds, and when you hit bumps in the street, in the road, potholes, speed bumps, stuff like that, making turns, it's not as wallowy. It doesn't sway as much going right and left. It's going to stay flatter in turns. It handles way better than a Rubicon Gladiator does on the street. That's absolute fact. So that's a huge consideration. I would say if you're going to get a Gladiator, this is why I said I think most people fit into the bill of getting a Mojave versus a Rubicon if you're going Gladiator. Obviously, if you get a Wrangler, you don't even have that option. There is no Mojave Wrangler because the short wheelbase on a Wrangler is not conducive to going fast off-road. That's what the Gladiator Mojave's for. It's got a longer wheelbase, stuff like that. So that's the other thing too, with it being higher already in the front. The Gladiator does have a longer wheelbase than a Tacoma or a Ranger or something like that. So your breakover angle is going to be a little bit lower in the middle and in the rear. So when you have a little bit of a higher suspension already out of the box, it's going to really translate to a little bit more clearance off-road. And if you want to buy a vehicle, drive it off the lot and not touch the suspension ever and just use it, the Mojave's the way to go. You're going to find very few instances where you're going to need the front locker of the Rubicon. So we'll get into that now. I think the Rubicon is for the guy who you plan on buying that truck, heavily modifying it to do some gnarly rock crawling. That's why you buy the Rubicon. And in my opinion, if you're doing that, again, this is just my opinion, buy the Wrangler Rubicon. It's got the shorter wheelbase. It's going to be more conducive to that type of terrain anyway. Gladiators are long. Even if you lift it, put big tires, now you're just increasing the center of gravity on it. So you can get a Wrangler Rubicon, keep it low, put some 37s on it with an 1 to 2 inch lift, and that thing's going to crawl over anything you throw at it. The Gladiator, you need a lot more ground clearance to go over the rocks and gnarly stuff, just because of how long the wheelbase is. So, but the Rubicon's going to be for the guy who doesn't plan on keeping it stock. I think if you're keeping it stock out of the factory, again, the Mojave's the truck. It drives better on the street. It's got everything you need for the occasional trail ride. And I've done some pretty technical trail riding with my last one, and it handles it great, no problem. The rear locker's all I needed. I hardly even needed that. The four-wheel drive system works great, and the tires are great. These Falcon Wild Peak 33s are awesome. They ride straight as an arrow, super smooth down the freeway. Great tire. Obviously, they come on the Rubicon too. But the Rubicon suspension is very soft and wallowy. On the street, you're going to notice that right away. Maybe not the first day. Once that honeymoon phase wears off, you're going to start realizing, oh, this truck's pretty soft. It bottoms out sometimes. It rolls and turns, you know what I mean? This is going to stay flatter on the street. But if I was going to do a full-on build on a Gladiator, and I was going to do some gnarly rock crawling, and I was going to put a huge lift on it, 38s, 40s under it, I wouldn't have bought the Mojave. I would have bought the Rubicon. That's what that truck is for. That's for that guy who needs the front locker, the super low crawl ratio transfer case. Get the Rubicon. Then that truck is for you. So we're back on the inside of the truck. It was just so hot outside. We're in southern Arizona. It's 102 today. So camera was overheating, so we had to get back. And I was overheating too, so we're back in the truck. So we'll finish off the video here. What I was saying is the Rubicon, again, if you're that guy and you want 40s and build it up, get the Rubicon. That's the truck for you. If you're just daily driving it and you want to haul your dirt bikes and your ATVs and go back and forth to work with it, and you're going to hit the occasional trail, even more than the occasional trail. I mean, 90% of the trails, the Mojave's going to handle no problem right out of the box. I think the Mojave's the better buy for you. When I had my first Mojave, which I said I had two Mojaves now, so I got about 14,000 miles of experience riding in the Mojave, so I kind of know the truck pretty well and how it handles certain situations, and there's nothing that's not been able to do for me. The Mojave's going to tow a little less. You can tow 6,000 pounds max tow rating, which is strange to me because the suspension in the Mojave, contrary to what you hear on other YouTube channels, the big name review channels, they don't know what they're talking about with the facts, to be honest with you, half the time, because they've never owned half of these vehicles. They get them for a week and they test them and they just spew off, information. But having owned one for thousands of miles, the Mojave suspension is stiffer than the Rubicon, and not the opposite, which some people think, oh, the Mojave's got softer suspension, softer Fox suspension, that's why the tow rating is lower. I don't know why the tow rating is lower. I think some of it doesn't make any sense actually, because it has better cooling than the other trucks too. It has a bigger alternator than the other trucks too, for running in a desert. So it doesn't make sense why it has a lower tow rating. Maybe it's got something to do with the valving and the shocks and just the way they respond. There's a lot of factors they consider, and plus the front end sits a little higher in the Mojave. So Mojave's rated to tow 6,000 pounds, and then the Rubicon I think is 7, and then the Sport S with the max tow package is the most you could tow in a Gladiator at 7,500 pounds. But let's be real. If you are towing more than 5,000 pounds regularly, you shouldn't be in a Gladiator in the first place. You shouldn't be in a mid-sized truck in the first place. I don't care what the tow ratings are. You should be in a half-ton truck. And the same goes true, just like people that are in half-ton trucks and they're towing 10,000 or more pounds because the manufacturer says you could tow 11,000, 12,000 pounds with it. Well, every test I've seen, their trannies are overheating, the trucks are overheating because they really can't handle it. They rate them for sales numbers, and they shouldn't be. You shouldn't be towing that kind of weight with a half-ton, and just like you shouldn't be towing more than 5,000 pounds with a mid-sized truck. You just shouldn't do it. Even if I was towing 5,000 pounds regularly, I wouldn't have this truck. I would have a half-ton truck, because a half-ton truck, my past trucks, Silverado, Tundras, handle that stuff like that's cakewalk. That's half-ton truck territory, 5,000 to 8,000 pounds. Anything over that, my opinion, is 3/4 ton. And then if you're less than, if you're 4,000 or under regularly, mid-sized trucks gonna have no problem. So, those are things to consider, obviously, tow ratings. But again, if you're towing, you shouldn't be towing over 6,000 pounds anyway with a half-ton truck regularly. Once a year, maybe, whatever, get away with it. You don't want to spend the money on a half-ton truck. I get it. So you can get away with it, but I wouldn't do it right on the regular. I just wouldn't do it. And then so the Mojave on the highway, dude, is just 75, 80 miles an hour. Just goes. It handles mint. I mean, you're still gonna have that Gladiator Jeep effect. We'll call it, not Gladiator effect, but like, you know, removable tops, all that stuff. You're gonna have the wind noise when you get the speeds come up 75, 80 miles an hour. You're gonna hear the road more than you would a traditional truck and traditional vehicle. But this suspension helps it ride planted and straighter and nicer on the road. It just does. The Rubicon shocks and the Rubicon suspension are set up very soft, and because it's for rock crawling, that slow crawl where they want the wheels to come up, the slow speed compression valving is just very soft in them, so they're just a lot more wallowy because that's what they're designed for. The slow speed compression valving in these shocks are set up stiffer so that you can take turns and stay flatter. It's not going to be like this. You're not going to be leaning. You can go 30, 40 miles an hour on a trail and hit some bumps without bottoming out. The high-speed compression valving is also stiffer, so it's going to take those hits. And that's what this suspension is for, and that translates to a better ride on the road. So again, if you don't need the front locker and the really low crawl ratio of the transfer case on the Rubicon, which you're only going to need if you're going to build the truck up and do some extreme rock crawling, get the Mojave. If you plan on not leaving the truck factory, you're going to rip the suspension out and build it up as soon as you leave the dealer, then it makes sense. You're the guy or the gal to buy the Rubicon. Buy that truck. But for the everyday person, the Mojave does 99% of everything you need it to. If you're going to leave it bone stock and just use it how it comes, get the Mojave. That's my personal opinion. That's my advice to you guys. Hope this was helpful for somebody. But these are things that I considered. When I bought this second Mojave, this is the second one I've owned. I had a 21 in Stingray. And I put about 6,800 miles on that one. I got about 7,400 on this one. When I was going to buy the second one, I thought to myself, oh, maybe I'll do something different this time. Had the Mojave, let me get the Rubicon. And with looking at them side by side and analyzing the things that I just talked about here with you guys, that's what led me to buy the Mojave again. I don't need the Rubicon. I don't need the front locker. I'm not going to take this long wheelbase mid-size truck over gnarly rocks and crazy trails. I'm going to do some light to moderate heavy trails with it, and it's going to do it just fine. I'm not going to do anything more gnarly than that. If I wanted to do something like that, I would buy, you know, a Rubicon Wrangler. I wouldn't buy a Rubicon Gladiator. That's just me. So again, take my advice with a grain of salt. Everybody's opinions are going to be different. This is just one opinion from a guy who's owned two Mojaves and has made this decision twice now. And I'm just kind of to help you guys, lead you to what helped me make the decision. Hopefully those things maybe you didn't think about, and maybe that'll help you with your decision. So I don't want to see anybody buy a truck and then, because I've been in that boat. You buy a truck or a vehicle and then you're like, I should have got the other one, or I should have bought this, or why did I buy this one? You know, and never have regrets. These are expensive purchases, so take it from a guy who knows. So thanks for checking out the video, guys. Smash that thumbs up button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're at just about 5,500 subscribers, cruising right along. So looking to grow the channel, and the more you guys like the videos, even leave a comment saying hi in it. You don't have to say anything. You can say you suck, whatever you want to tell me. Helps the algorithm, helps YouTube kind of push the videos, and other people see the videos besides my subscribers, and that just helps my channel grow. So if you guys could do that for me, I'd much appreciate it. If there's any other video content you want to see about the Gladiator, the Mojave specifically, which I own, like probably a little bit more of an expert on this truck. If you have anything else you want to know about, leave it in the comments below. I'd be happy to do a video on it if there's enough call for it, and if I feel like I can make a video that's going to be quality enough and informative enough for you. So I never kind of like to put out information that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So there's plenty of those channels out there. So thanks again for watching the video. Again, it's Joe with Odyssey Off-Road. Get out there on a trail, go buy yourself a Mojave, and we'll see you guys down the road.